Well, hello everyone. I'm Dale from the Precept classes in Cullman, Alabama, and I welcome you to lesson 1 of our new course that we've started, The Divided Heart and the Divided Nation. We're going to be looking at the kings of Israel, and we began this week in examining chapter 1 and chapter 2 of First Kings. At this point, we find out that King David, is at the end of his life. He is old and he is cold, and his servants came up with an idea because they would cover him up, but they couldn't keep him warm, and they said, "Let's look and find you a servant. Let's find you a virtuous virgin woman to come in and to nurse you and to keep you warm and to serve you." And they found such a girl named Abishag. And I love the way that King James puts it, that she came and she cherished David. She took care, I believe, of all the very things that are often needed to take care of someone who's at the end of their life, the physical needs that are there. And the scripture tells us forthright that David knew her not. Okay, he didn't have sex with her. He knew her not. Well, immediately you find out there's a problem that pops up here in the kingdom. David's oldest son was Adonijah. He's the oldest one that was still alive. And he comes along and usurps the kingship. He confers with Joab, who is David's army commander, and also with Abiathar, the priest. Now, Abiathar is the priest that was left over. If you remember back in Samuel, David went to get some food from a town that has some priests in it. Saul found out about it and killed all the priests in that town, save one. Abiathar was the one who survived. And David told him, "If you stay with me, you'll be okay." And he has been for these many, many years. Now, Adonijah conferred with these two and came along and made himself king. Now, all these folks knew that God had chosen Solomon. You see this in First Chronicles. David comes along and says, "Hey, God has told me that my son Solomon will be king." And he told all the leadership to help Solomon and to follow Solomon. But these men right here, particularly Adonijah, were motivated by jealousy and selfish ambition. And so they came together. They were going to have this big gathering, and they invited all the king's sons and all the other folks, but they did not invite Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaniah, and David's mighty men. They didn't invite Solomon, and they didn't invite Shemaiah. We'll see some more about him in just a minute. Well, Nathan finds out about this, and he comes along and he tells Bathsheba, "We have to, have a strategy here to inform King David about what's going on." And so when you read the first chapter, you find out what they did, and they came along and informed the king. So the king gave orders. And he gave orders for them to go out and to anoint Solomon as king. So Nathan did this. And when you read the balance of the chapter out there, you see what they did. They actually went out and got the king's mule. And all the people rejoiced because they realized now King David has said that King Solomon is going to be king. He anointed him as king. They had sort of a co-regency going here for a period of time. Now Adonijah found out about this, and he just panicked. Okay, he panicked. He ran to the altar for protection. Now, this would have been the altar in the Mosaic tabernacle, not in the tent that David had set up for the Ark of the Covenant. It's not the Ark of the Covenant. It's the altar of sacrifice that he ran to at this time. Solomon found out about this, so he had Adonijah brought before him. Adonijah bowed before him, and Solomon said, "If you will do what is right, and there's no evil found in you, you'll be okay." And he sends Adonijah home. Well, we'll see what happens in just a moment. We get the second chapter of 1 Kings. And we see that Solomon's kingdom is literally being established here, and all these very things that are occurring. David comes along this time and charges Solomon. Now, he's done this a couple of times. He tells him various things. "My son, do this, heed the word." But here he comes along and he says, "You be strong and you show yourself a man." And this particular charge really focuses in on individuals. Now, I want to tell you right up front what I think is happening here. I think that King David is releasing Solomon from David's promises, because there's some things right here that David had promised some people. "I'm not going to kill you because of what I've done." But he's releasing Solomon from these promises, but he is not telling Solomon to go out and to kill these folks. A lot of times people think that, and that would have been very inconsistent with the way that David lived and his faith and what he did if he got at the end of his life and said, "Oh yeah, I promised not to harm these folks, but now I'm about to die, so son, you take care of it." No, that's not what he's doing at all. He was telling Solomon, and he said it a couple times, he said, "You deal with them in your wisdom. You deal with these folks." And I think that David was speaking the truth. I think he was speaking wisdom prophetically, because he was saying, "You deal with them in wisdom, but do not allow their hoary heads," what the King James says, their gray head, to go down to Sheol in peace. That he was letting Solomon know that these folks are going to reveal themselves. You keep an eye on them, they're going to reveal themselves, and then you deal with them in the way that you know is the wise way. And so the first one that popped up was Adonijah. We just saw him a while ago. he comes before Bathsheba and says, hey, will you go to Solomon and ask him if I can have Abishai as my wife? Now, the way he does it's just very arrogant, because he tells Bathsheba, you know, all of Israel was following me. You know, I could have been king, but God chose Solomon. So the least I could get out of it would be this wife. Well, this was a ploy to ascend to the king, because all of Israel would have thought that Adonijah was the proper king if Adonijah had this woman as his wife. Well, Solomon saw right through it. Sometimes people think Bathsheba didn't see through it. I think Bathsheba saw through it. I think she knew exactly what was going on. I think she presented to the king knowing what the king would do, because the king saw through it, realized what was going on. And he said, you know what? You have brought judgment on yourself today. I told you if you lived right, you'd be right. But you don't. You didn't. And it cost him his life. And Solomon had him killed. Next one we see is Abiathar. Abiathar was a descendant of Eli. And Eli had been told that because of the things that happened with him and his sons, that the priesthood would not last forever in his family. And this is prophecy fulfilled. Solomon dismissed him. He didn't execute him or anything like that. He dismissed him. It's a picture of justice and mercy. And he allowed him to go home. And he said, I'm doing this because of your service to my father David, and also because you carried the ark. Well, Joab heard what was going on. He fled to the altar. And when Solomon called for him to come forth, he refused to go to Solomon. He said, I'm not going to go up there. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to hang on to this. You'll have to kill me here. And Solomon said, go ahead, kill him there. And the Jewish people didn't believe that you could kill somebody hanging on the altar. That was a place that they thought was sacrosanct, that nobody could do that. But this guy had blood on his hand. He had killed Abner and Amasa and Absalom. Don't forget that. David had said, deal gently with Absalom, and Joab didn't. He killed him. And that blood came back on his head, and Solomon had him killed. And then you say Shimei. You see Shimei here. He's the one that cursed David. But when David came back in to Jerusalem, he repented before David. And David said, I won't kill you. But David had told Solomon, watch out for this guy. So Solomon comes along before him and says, here's what I want you to do. Go ahead and build a house here. But you are not to leave this area. And he told him exactly where. He said, you stay in the town limits right here. If you cross that creek right there, you're in trouble. Well, 3 years later, some of his slaves ran off to Gath, the Philistines. He went and got them. When he came back, it was reported back to Solomon that he had left. Solomon comes, brings it forth and says, you know what? Your evil heart has been revealed right here. And he had him executed. Then David also told Solomon this. Remember to show kindness to the sons, Barzillai. This was the guy that had brought victuals to David and his entourage when they were fleeing. And he told him, he said, you continue to show kindness to him. In all of this, Solomon exhibited wisdom, mercy, justice, and humility. And the last thing that we see right here, what we studied this week, is that Solomon's kingdom was established. Usually when the king came along, the king would come and execute everybody that would get in the way, you know, all the people a threat. Solomon did not do that. He trusted the Lord to move the enemy out of the way, which is exactly what he did. He was a man of peace and did not have blood upon his hands. And God took care of all the enemies that would come against him, because Solomon listened to the wisdom of the Lord. He gave the people opportunity. You see justice and you see mercy manifested. And I just pray that the same thing will happen to us. Again, I'm Dale from the Precept classes in Coleman, Alabama. And I thank you for being with us. And I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.